Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle. I'm a principal product manager in the IT space.
And I'm Houston Chatham-Wright. I am a principal technical product manager in People Technologies, which is our HR tech space.
Today we're talking to you about our unified support experience between IT and HR, facilities, and more. We'll talk to you a little bit about where we started on our journey. Hopefully it looks a little bit like yours. I'll look at AskEG today. AskEG is what we call our support platform. And we'll also look at what's on the horizon, how we're thinking about success metrics and our roadmap this year.
Awesome. So where we think about where we started, and where we started was just last year. And it's where we've been for quite a while. So where we started when we think about this is, we started with 4 separate ways to ingress or find information from facilities, IT, and HR. As you look across the different systems that we have, that means that we have put that burden and that onus on the employee to know where to go to find information. And that's not always clear. You think about, hey, coming back to the office, I'm going to be walking into the office and I want to make sure my badge works. Where do I go for that? Oh, that seems like that would be a facilities thing. But it's really not. That's a security thing which rolls up through IT. And an employee is not going to know that. We also think about things where relocations, hybrid work, moving places across the country or across the world. In those types of scenarios, you're going to go in and know, oh, I need to work with HR, I need to get payroll updated, I need to submit a request to move. Once that's been approved by HR, though, they're done. They're out of the mix in that scenario. So now it's on the employee to say, hey, what I need to do is I need to go in and ask from IT, hey, I'm moving from the US to the UK. I'm going to need a new charger. You submit that request through, though, IT doesn't have any context to know that you're doing that. So you submit your request through thinking, oh, I've just got this process approved. Hey, IT, I'm going to be working from the UK office. What does that mean? They're going to come back to you potentially, look and see that right now in the system, you're tagged as US and go, oh, when you arrive in the office, just stop by the walk-up desk and pick up, and they'll give you a loaner that you can use while you're there, not understanding the context of you're in the middle of a relocation to the UK. So those are the problems that we saw with where we were. And that's really why we came up with this vision that you see behind me, which is one unified portal and one unified platform where an employee can go and search for information, ask their question, and engage support throughout their journey. That might be things from a career development perspective, that might be things from a life journey moment, something that's personal to me but is going to impact my employment with Expedia Group. And so that's where we really said we need to bring that holistic vision together and say, let's lay that foundation so that those things like relocating, like coming back to the office, are seamless for the employee, and they only need to know one thing: I just need to ask EG.
So that's where we are today. AskEG, Ask Expedia Group. We want to make one place for any question that you have across the company. So we're going to share a little bit of our supporting technology and some of the use cases that we're talking through. Here's a view of our portal. You'll notice the virtual agent icon on the bottom right. Pops up, looks like a regular virtual agent. This is mostly out of box. So we've done some light configurations, but one of our strategies was to stay out of box as long as possible so that we can have a really smooth upgrade cycle. Unified targeted experiences. This is amazing for Expedia Group. We recently upgraded to the HR Enterprise module and the ITSM Pro module, and that gives us the ability to have team-agnostic, very simplified workflows that they're going to integrate across our other platforms, like Atlassian, like Workday, all of the other platforms. We're also seeing campaigns. Campaigns have relevant action-based information, and then they disappear when the employee has taken that action. So if you don't take an action, we're going to nudge you, and we'll nudge you in Slack, we'll nudge you on the portal with targeted graphics, but as soon as you do that, it goes away. AskEG is built with a lot of technology. We are trying to simplify the experience, but know that it's very complex underneath. We're using the Employee Center Pro. We got that with HR Enterprise. We're using the virtual agent for HR and IT. We had to upgrade to IT Pro to get that virtual agent experience there. We also have a Slack app, because we know that employees are working on their phone, they're working in Slack. So when they need help, it has to be contextual. We use universal request to help that cross-team collaboration. When we're not sure where the ticket goes, that's not the employee's problem. They get one universal request number, and we do this in the back end. And speaking of the back end, our technicians need optimizations as well. So they're using the agent workspace. This enables them to take a live agent transfer from that virtual agent and see a lot of things in context. The integration hub, also essential to powering the platform of platforms. And then we have some future growth plan that we'll share with you in a few slides, but mobile app is on the list, communities are on the list, and I'm so excited about microsites that are coming out in a couple releases.
Now is our opportunity. We've gone through a lot of information fast, but this is probably what you're going to care about most, which is what does it take to actually bring together IT and HR and facilities. It's not really the heavy lift that you will experience is not within the actual technology build-out. I can tell you overseeing that, it's not something where it's, that's the long pole and the business is ready and waiting, but we're waiting for that development. It's really around centralizing how everybody operates. IT and facilities and HR operate significantly different. Each of us do. With HR, we try very heavily to deflect where possible, so we lead with education. We have a service catalog, but when you search what was People Hub and is now Ask EG, you don't actually find a catalog item in search. That is only attached to a knowledge article. We are trying to drive you to find the information first before you raise a request for information. So that is really how HR has operated. And then when we get into the IT space, it has been how can we help you most? Here's how you live chat with us. Here is how you can go through, call us. You can just click this button every time and raise a case. So finding the balance there and figuring out how does that operate and bringing really the employee through and not making them determine how am I supposed to open a case? Okay, well, if it's an IT thing, the button's over here. If it's an HR thing, then I got to go find an article and then do this. So we really came together to find that middle ground and say, hey, we might in the background still operate separately, but the UI that we're presenting to the employee needs to be unified. How you open a case with or start a live chat with IT is in the exact same location as how you open a case with HR. They're going into two totally different spaces and technologies, but it's a unified experience so the employee at least knows, hey, I find an article, and then I find this button up here that allows me to open a request or engage support. The other thing that we really kind of looked at was how do we make it agnostic? It shouldn't feel like I went to this portal and then I clearly made it into the IT space or I clearly made it into the HR space. That meant for both of us going through and removing a lot of branding from articles. We had a lot of things that was like, we are IT, we are HR, hey, here's all this. We had different branding schemes, different color schemes. All of that kind of stuff was removed, and we're still removing it from some attributes, but really going through and saying it doesn't actually matter. An employee doesn't care. They don't care that your badge is done through security, which is IT, not facilities. They just want the answer or they just want the support. So that's how we try to really position the portal, is just to be unified and agnostic across the teams. The last thing is really success metrics. When we talk about the metrics that we care about and that are driving the behaviors of the development that we're doing, that needs to be based on the employee. There's a certain level of transactional metrics that are important in the background from an operational perspective, but when we think about experience, we need to think about the employee. We don't think about mean time to resolve as like, how quickly can I get my caseworker on to the next one? It's really about, hey, it might take a little bit longer, but if we can answer all the aspects of that and have a first-time resolution, that employee is not angry with us and having to come back. No, that really wasn't what I wanted. I still need support in this way. So that's where we really focused and said, hey, across the board, we need to be looking at unified metrics when it comes to deflection, when it comes to experience and such.
Houston mentioned mean time to resolution, which is such an important metric for our ops teams, but employees care about productivity loss, and we care about getting our employee base to be their most effective selves. So our success metrics really have to consider that so that we're prioritizing in that way. And we're sharing these friction points because this is not easy. This is a very challenging, highly complex enterprise thing. I'm seeing a lot of heads nodding. This is not easy. And so these 3 areas that we're diving into here, hoping to give you some of the behind the scenes for what to expect. Governance is not fun. No one wants to talk about governance. I'm seeing my team smile because it's our favorite word, because we know how important it is. So setting up taxonomy, how things are laid out in the navigation, understanding the cohesiveness of knowledge articles, how we talk about topics in the virtual agent, how there's not overlap, there's cohesion, and how our catalog items all have to have the same look and feel, but experience. It's got to be easy, friction-free, and integrated. That is so, so hard. It's really hard. Especially hard when you have ownership across multiple teams. If you're listening, you probably have an IT team and an HR team and a couple other teams that work very differently, sometimes both on the ServiceNow platform. Yep. Houston has an engineering team. Gentleman in the front row has an engineering team, different parts of the platform. So we've had to learn to work together and learn to see through lots of different policies that each of our teams have to maintain.
And really on that point, understanding too, what is the scope of support of each team? Because when you have multiple development teams and you come into a unified portal, number one thing we see is like, wait, we saw that feedback coming through, we're actioning that feedback. And then you'll notice, oh, well, I see over here there's already a development task in flight with another team. And so really defining, it doesn't mean there must be one team, but it must be there's a clear expectation of how you approach that and make sure that you have clear communication cross-team. We still, to this day, operate as 2 development teams. We still, depending upon what's on each other's roadmap, will take different items cross-team to be able to support and say, hey, we're working on this big boulder right now, but I have a little bit of resource, I can take one of these items that came through. So really being able to say, hey, there's not one holistic owner, and when you think about scalability, there can't be one person. When you think about scalability, and I know there's another session on citizen developers who are making those catalog items, when you think about your content community, when you have many people out there doing that, it's really how do you put a system in place that allows them all to successfully put something out that still feels cohesive in the portal.
He used to mention scale. One person can't do all of this. So we talk about democratizing onboarding, meaning enabling onboarding to our platform to be easier, still governed, but available to different service teams around the company. AskEG is right now IT, HR, and facilities, but there should be developer support in here. There should be finance support. Anyone that has an intake or a service that they provide should be in AskEG. So we've got a big roadmap ahead of us. What makes it work, though, is that we talk all the time. We have agile teams, we work together, but we are constantly understanding what's in each other's backlogs and what's in each other's priority this time.
And then when we think about how we got to our deployment, largest piece that we had was when we talk about employee experience, the employee. We sat down with employees throughout the build experience. So prior to us even starting any development, we already knew from the different experiences that we provided today, what were many of those pain points. 2 of those portals that we showed earlier were on ServiceNow. So we already had a starting point. We weren't starting from the ground up and saying like, well, how do we want this portal to be, these different things. We had the framework to say, we already are using an out-of-box portal and we're using it in this way. What is the feedback that we're getting on that experience? Then being able to take that and morph that and say, okay, based on that, let's do our first iteration. So we took feedback from our existing portals and we used that feedback for our first iteration. We then went back to employees and we sat down with them in groups of 5, and they were broke up by things like tenure. So we met with groups that had only had a tenure of less than 3 months, freshly going through onboarding and those types of things, and figuring out what is your experience here? Asking them very strategically, hey, how would you request a Miro license? How would you go through and request this piece of information from HR? And out of 5 people, I can tell you we got 5 different results of how they tried to navigate there. So really taking those pieces of information back and then putting that directly into the development that we were doing. The other thing that we really had to align on was, this was the first time, at least in my experience or in my area, where this was not driven by, like in HR, the COEs. When you think about navigation, you think about topics. We did not go to the COEs and go, what do you want your topics to be? because that inherently will have an HR lens on it. And it did. One of their first things they gave us for our topics was mobility. I, coming from the IT space originally, was like, what's this got to do with phones? Like mobile phones, what are we doing here?
Did anyone know what mobility was before we said the phone word? It means all kinds of things.
So that's where we really sat down and we went through that taxonomy. We got that initial from our COE partners, but we brought them along on the journey. We let them know up front, hey, we're going to go through, we're going to build this out. I need from you, these pieces of information, and then we will go to the employees and hear what they come back with. And that drove changes in things like the word voice from an IT perspective. It did not resonate with many employees. Even our design team, when we originally had put it out, goes, I don't know what to make for an icon for voice.
Telephone.
What is it?
Voice.
And so really being able to take those pieces of information and say, hey, we're going to partner with our business partners and our stakeholders and we're going to get the information, but we're really going to apply the employee lens, and the employee is the one that's going to win in this scenario. It's still a conversation, but that's the focus that we have, and we continue to listen to those employees, not only before and through development, but even post-deployment. Pulling employees who have visited the portal more than 3 times in a month, saying, hey, let's get some feedback from you now that you've used it a couple of times, now that you're applying real-life use cases to it. So those are things that we think about, and we take that information and then we iterate with an intent. And I really tie in the using the data and the iterating with intent from the perspective of these are so closely aligned, and we need to use the information that we get to base our decisions on. We should not be getting an email from some leader that goes, I just tried to do this in the virtual agent and it didn't work, and then immediately be going and driving a change. We need to see what is the experience. How many people have gotten that? Am I trying to now change something because 5 people out of 1,000 have just used this, did that? Or, hey, you're right, I just looked and 70% of the people that do go down this universal request flow do fall out and end up having to call the GSD or reach out directly through an easy button. So those are the things that we think about in that scenario.
It just occurred to me that we didn't explain what champagne launch is.
Oh yeah, I totally skipped champagne launch. When we, another great way that we like to listen is we like to fully deploy into production whatever that application is, in this case AskEG. And then we have a window where we share it with our teams, so IT, facilities, and HR actually had access to AskEG in advance. They got a 2-week window not to complete testing, but to actually be able to go in and use the tool and get that first glimpse and be able to provide us feedback back going, hey, before it goes out to general population, here's some things I've seen. And so that way we can take that information and then we can digest it and say, do we need a change before launch? Or do we add that into our continual iteration and say, we'll grab that in the next round?
We have 2 minutes left and there's so much on the horizon. So I'm not done yet.
Oh.
We're going to do Q&A over there after this. So when we think about measuring success, and when we talk about success, it's how do we continually improve so that it's successful for our employees? We're thinking about it in 4 ways. Adoption, that's the easy one, very easy to know. How many people use the virtual agent? How many people come regularly? Deflection, we talked a bunch about deflection. Tier 0 effectiveness is what we call it. Is self-service effective? Tons of ops metrics on that. Confidence, do I feel like this is going to answer my questions? And this is the hardest to quantify. Tons of signals, tons of data analysts, and a lot of thought put into how we measure how confident employees will be in using this tool. And then 4th, completion. Of the world of knowable things in here, how many of them are represented in AskEG? So we've got a long ways to go. We've done a lot of good stuff, but we've got a long ways to go.
Yep. And so I think as we think about where we're going, it's really just leaning into the technology more and building more across the different iterations of those employee journeys. So you can see we are lighting up actually shortly at the end of this month the pre-hire access to AskEG so that people onboarding will be able to get that same information they need and be ready for day one. Launching the mobile app, accelerating things like our intranet and being able to say not only can you go here and find answers and information, But hey, can it actually take over potentially the internet and be that one-stop shop for all? And then as we look at 2023, really looking at transitions, looking at promotions, how do we set up somebody for success? How do we make sure that they are able to focus on work and not focus on how to do their job?
Thank you.